First of all, thank you very much. And Guy already mentioned a couple of things which I think we're going to hear more often. Yeah? Making things easier and simpler and harmonized, yeah? Which is probably more or less the base for making things simpler. My name is Armin Peter. I was actually the global head of debt syndicate and sustainable banking at UBS. And more recently, I actually turned from a transactional consideration more into a system-oriented focus. Because I do believe we are at times where we live in system change. Someone has to lead it. And it is actually with that kind of narrative that the CEO, Brian Pascoe at ICMA, has asked me to help them to run a project on primary market innovation. Now, primary market, I put primary always in brackets because you can't innovate more or less the primary market in isolation of the bigger picture. I'm here actually to brief you on exactly that kind of the project. So why have we done it, what have we actually done, and how we did it, and most importantly, what it actually means for this room. Yeah? For a room where I would say the covered bond market is the most harmonized capital market that you can find. Yeah? I think it's a very high privilege this covered bond market has, you know, with all the regulatory benefits and so on. And I think hopefully what I'm gonna tell you a little bit about resonates with you, and hopefully in the future we can even work together. I think we all agree with the fact that we are living in a time that sees a lot of changes. Yeah? And I would say I took it at least as my forthcoming job description. What Larry Fink in December 23 said in Dubai at COP. He said a sentence: we need to rethink the finance architecture. And frankly, being a capital markets guy for all my life, 25 years and beyond, yeah, I'm just excited about it, yeah? And consider actually what it means. He's saying it in the context of sustainability because he feels we can't move capital fast enough into the place where we need financing most. He said the very same sentence actually when he launched the Bitcoin ETF and embraced tokenization as the underlying infrastructure of the future, how financial products will be distributed globally. So on the one hand, we have a thematic change that is changing capital markets, and then underneath we have a technology and infrastructure layer that is changing. You're going to hear more often about AI today and you know, the technology of things. So it just is this time where all of a sudden we are dealing with two massive changes, thematically and from an infrastructure perspective. And we need to remind actually all the people that we hired over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, yeah, where we gave them a job description, sit down, do this, and you do it faster and more cost efficient, yeah, that in the end, the capital market is a reflection of economic activity. Now, on the what, you know, what is actually changing or what is driving these changes? Yeah, the naysayers would say, "Come on, guys, you know, we have been adopting to changes in capital market ever so often," and it's true. Yeah, I think what is slightly different. Yeah, we've integrated, you know, sustainability over the last 10 years. Got a little bit of a greenwashing bashing. We need to retreat on the regulatory side of things, but by large, I would say we've done a good job to integrate the consideration of decarbonization. So we always deal with changes in capital market very well, but I think what's unique in our career for the very first time, we need to actually think about the infrastructure at the same point in time. We need to become a bit more technical about things in the way how we do things. In the middle, I have to remind people, yeah, in particular the younger generation, how important the primary market is, because primary capital market is somewhat the center of capital markets. It is the birthplace where we are creating financial assets. Without this creation of financial assets, the secondary market has nothing to trade. And frankly, the financial market has less to invest in. So I think that realization, yeah, and remembering people of that central position is key. Remembering people as well that when you are a syndicate manager, and I always said to my syndicate team, just make sure that you're not becoming an execution monkey. You are in the middle of things. Yeah? All the information comes to you. I mean, every business model out there these days actually would wish to be in such central function, right? And it is actually in the primary market where so many constituencies have to come together that we can change things. Right? And people in the secondary market very often actually forget about the fact when they were saying, oh, you know what, in primary market you haven't really changed the last 15 years. Yeah? They do forget that they only trade an ISIN, nothing else. They trade an identification number, yeah, of an asset that we created, and we only were able to create it by shouting as a syndicate manager at some point, deal is priced, because so many different constituencies are coming together. So I think this scene setting is required. When we started on this journey at the back end of last year with interviews, yeah, it was actually a bottom-up consideration. Orchestrating everyone into a room, discussing what people think actually about primary market innovation, what does it mean? So it was a little bit of a bottom-up exercise, yeah? And the surprising part was everyone joined. After the first round of roundtables, of which we have done 6, yeah, you know, imagine 25 people sit in a room, talk about primary market innovation, yeah, what does that mean? Second round of roundtables were then in May, yeah, where we brought the system together, yeah? And in April, we got this European consultation paper coming out, yeah, investigating and proclaiming actually for the fact that we need modernized market, we need to think about how to adopt technology, identify barriers and so to make things simpler, more smoother, back to front. So all of a sudden, we're sitting there, having a discussion bottom up, and suddenly we get more or less the very same mandate top down. So you can imagine with all what we've done, actually we're going to be in Brussels on the 24th and actually tell them exactly what we have done. So we are not getting over-regulated yet again because there is no need. But there is, for the first time, bottom up and top down, we're thinking the same thing. What have we done? Yeah? First of all, when you go into a room and you talk about innovation, yeah, if I ask the room here, everyone has a different consideration what innovation actually means. The same, very same when we invited for the stakeholder roundtables. And I needed to make sure that I have stakeholders in the first place. So 15 issuers, 15 investors, 15 secondary market guys, 15 you know, vendors. Yeah, that was a bit of a doom room at this point in time, and I will tell you later why. But it was very, very important to consolidate the message of the investors and the syndicate managers when we talk about primary market innovation. So it was very important because when we brought the bunch together in system roundtables, so yet again, think about 25 people in the room, and I picked 3 people from the syndicate desk, 3 people from the investors, 3 people from secondary market, and so on. I needed to make sure when these 3 people are reflecting their consideration and assumption of innovation and what they need and why they need it in a harmonized way. So we needed really starting to zoom in on the language. It became very, very fast, very clear, yeah, that the definition of change and innovation, yeah, continues to evolve. And frankly, if you have changed one thing, guess what? Next day, the definition of change is very different. And this is a mindset that we need to keep. Yeah. 2 sentences I like to highlight. Yeah. The one, scaling innovation, yeah, is the challenge of the innovation itself, i.e. on the product side. And I will come on this separation between product and process in a minute. But scaling innovation is a challenge of innovation. So Singapore was on the line, yeah, from the stock exchange and said, Armin, you know, we've done these digital bonds, what now? We have proven that it works, how do we get it to scale? So that's what it means, yeah, when we say that scaling is, you know, innovation is actually the challenge, not the innovation itself. Often technology, everything's possible, how to implement it. And that's the second sentence. Implementation is a challenge of innovation on the process side. So you have all the vendors who are providing solutions, yeah, for a single piece of a back-to-front process, and they just wonder why people are not adopting it. Guess what? Because probably those solutions are only solving a small part of a bigger problem that we have back to front. Now, finding actually those people who understand still the back to front process in a very specialized world that we live in is probably a challenge in itself. What we agreed on, and it's very, very important, going into this room, we need to find agreements. Because only once you have an agreement, you're on the same starting line to walk in the same direction. Yeah, if everyone has something else in mind, guess what? The one who runs in this direction, the other one runs in this direction. So we needed to make sure that my CEO gets actually, you know, what's the role of ICMA, yeah, in this entire thing? Because we are working for members. If the members would say, honestly, I mean, this is nonsense, forget it, don't do it, yeah, then frankly, we wouldn't do it. Definition of change and innovation, I already touched on that. Yeah, it's very, very important. And I think the sustainability world, has given us a good lesson because they forgot to actually explain, and what the definition of sustainable investing means. So out of that, we needed to go through the greenwashing exercise. We don't want to go through the same thing. State of mind, very important, and I will come to this point because the state of mind in the room is important, because if you talk about change, guess what? It can immediately become a little bit of a fight between the different thinkings. So state of mind is important to then define what is the next step and therefore a roadmap. Don't want to go through all these items, but I mentioned earlier on that I'm going to talk about two very, very important distinctions. When you go in a room and you talk about innovation, are we talking about process or are we talking about product? Because the one is process about electronification and the life cycle of a transaction. The other one is the product itself. Are we talking tokenization? Are we actually talking about digital cash? Are we talking about tokenization of the underlying asset? Yeah? And I think this strategic thinking about splitting this and breaking it down into blocks is very, very important. State of mind. Guess what? If you're a syndicate manager in the last 10 years and you're hearing the secondary market guys, you haven't changed in the last 15 years, you're Flintstones and so on, I need to set the scene in some way because there is a big difference between a competitive system change in the secondary market. If BlackRock comes and says, give me a price on this portfolio of things and you're not capable, guess what? You're out of business. In primary markets, we are competing to win a mandate in the first place. And when you come to the execution, we come together to a system because all these different constituencies are coming together. Guess what? So we are using a system change environment. So the system needs to agree on the fact that we are doing things tomorrow in a different way. And frankly, we are very effective in our prime mandate. The prime mandate is actually to get money to the issuer. And we've done that. So we are at a point where we can't afford to break. We can't afford to break what's not really broken. Frankly, KfW doing a digital bond, that's great. Can they do 65 billion? Answer no. Yeah, and so we need to be realistic about. We need to be realistic about the fact that we do have process inefficiencies, that we have barriers, yeah, for entries for issuers and investors. Yeah. The democratization is a universal language that even governments are talking about in terms of access of capital markets. And last but not least, for any naysayer, for any leader of the business, the leaders need to understand that there is a sandbox, that there is a model change on the horizon. It's their responsibility to lead their teams into this change. So in the end, we came up with this picture, that when you are in primary markets nowadays, the change comes from both sides. Yeah? The change comes on the one hand about process and the workflow, and on the other side about the model change, tokenization I mentioned earlier on. So be aware of that. And I can tell you, in these rooms I had more than 150 people, 80% of the rooms was on workflow. It was amazing that no one quit on me on the system roundtables, because everyone in the meantime has the same mandate. Be efficient, look into the workflow, and see how we can make it better. What we've done next, everyone was talking about, it all starts with data harmonization. And personally, myself and Gabriel at ICMA, we invented the bond data taxonomy, which is a very simple, machine-readable, harmonized taxonomy for the DNA of a bond. Very simple, right? But it's so difficult to make the system agree on this. So we are engaging with the regulator. The beauty of the bond data taxonomy is as well, if you harmonize data, it serves the purpose of today, i.e. the workflow, and it serves actually the future in terms of preparing the ground for digital markets. So we're doing this, we explain what the BDT does, we tell the people actually how many use cases there are, that there are producers of the BDT and there are consumers of the BDT. And we tell everyone, just be aware, the tide is rising. When I'm saying the tide is rising is, my last trade that I've done at UBS was actually the digital green bond for Hong Kong Monetary Authority. It was Kenneth for the first time using the ICMA bond data taxonomy. It then went into the tokenization bond framework for the MAS Project Guardian in Singapore. In the meantime, we are talking with SWIFT to bring it under the ISO 20022. We have the ICSDs engaging, so we do expect the ICSD to embrace this as well. And just 2 weeks ago, the World Bank came out, where by embracing the bond data taxonomy in their Astra and Shastra project, where they're combining the bond data taxonomy with AI. Yeah? So they are really using it just through the lens of an issuer and through the lens of an investor. There are other things to be done. You know, we need to go out and speak and collaborate with other associations. And out of that, thank you very much for being here today and engage with the ECBC. What does it mean for the covered bond market? As I said earlier on, actually, it is you guys, this room, that understands what harmonization is, what efficiency means, particularly on the covered bond label. I think what we can do and should do when we are talking about efficiency is driven by the fact of data standards. Then there is, on the one hand, the product data, which is the transparency data that we have on the covered bond pool and illustrated through the label. And then there is underneath the infrastructure data of a transaction. And that means it's the bond data taxonomy of ICMA. So I think the combination of both makes, yet again, this market actually the one who is most advanced, and we'll see other markets following very swiftly. And frankly, with that, I can only ask you to be aware, engage. If you're interested, please reach out. If you have ideas, because it stimulates somewhat food of thoughts, what I just presented, then please embrace it, connect with us, and connect with me, and let's see where we can be jointly on this journey. With that, I stop.
Thank you very much, Armin.